So I think all of you have attempted the test. I'm assuming. Ensure that you don't miss, because we are doing this for a purpose, that we at least finish whole of anthropology syllabus by November. And all of you have already done your basic anthro. What are we doing here is we are fundamentally testing our concepts, right? And writing it on schedule is very important. Because when you are writing, you would have understood how difficult it is to write an answer, especially when it comes to optional, right? So ensure that you don't miss the schedule, one, and ensure that you are somehow covering the syllabus within that particular schedule. Then only the purpose of keeping that schedule is, it's meaningful there at that particular point of time. Why? Because we have 18 tests. Now in those 18 tests, if you are able to do on a weekly basis, because we are having small portions, we are not having elaborate syllabus. The next test is what? 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, which is a very small portion again. So if you are able to do this on a weekly basis, you should be able to finish your basic notes. You should be able to look at your PYQs and then come and attempt the test on every Saturday that we are conducting, right? Get into the explanation session of the first paper here. Now before I get into this, always remember that there are certain general instructions that you will have to follow whenever you are attempting your paper. I always keep telling that never start with 10 markers. That is always the thumb rule, always. Why? Because 10 marker as such would demand precision. 10 markers would also have less space. So I will have to be very, very precise when I am writing this answer. And for me to express something in a precise manner, I need to have the warm-up which is done. And whenever you are attempting the final paper, for suppose, that means I am not talking about the test series. Whenever you are attempting the final paper, I always keep telling, attempt one of these questions from section A first. Because you know, for every set you will have 20, 15, 15, which is A, B, C. Attempt one of these first, then go to section B. There you attempt one of these. That means either it is A, B, C, you know it is 20, 15, 15. Right? Because anyway, you know, you'll have to pick up one from each section. Now you have done your basic section. After this particular attempt, so first should be either 2, 3 or 4. Second should be 6 or 7 or 8. Then come back to the first question, where you are writing 10 markers, that is 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 10 marker. And then choose the 50 marker set, either that is whatever is remaining of these two. That means whatever is remaining after writing 1 or 2, you choose that in the next. And towards the last, you will write a fifth question, that is 5A, B, C, D, E. Fifth question. This is the general order of attempt for a reason that you will have to be more precise when you are writing 10 markers. And we need warm-up, we need the jargon, we need the tempo for us to write those 10 markers. So we are placing 10 markers somewhere in the middle. An examiner is going to read your paper by reading first question, and the impression is going to be formed with the first question. So I am not writing 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E towards the last, but I am writing it in the middle such that I am maintaining quality, quantity, tempo, jargons, momentum, professionalism, everything is at its peak at the center. And then I get into the fourth question, and then the fifth question. I am writing it last because by then examiner would have already evaluated at least 2 questions of yours. The tempo is set and he would have understood what is your basic understanding of the subject. That is one definite approach. So when it comes to the test, you should have started off with the 20 marker set, right? That should have been your approach such that you are able to finish that in the time. Okay. Now coming to the first question. The first question is asking about liminality and Turner. Very simple. Now when you look at 1A, the basic structure should have been what? You should have introduced with what is liminality. You should have talked about what are the stages of liminality, and you should have spoken about what are the characteristics of liminality. That means after defining liminality, the next para should have been, or the next aspect should have been stages, the next aspect should have been characteristics of liminality. Because liminality is nothing but the transitionary phase. In Arnold van Gennep's understanding of Wright's D passage, he talks about what? Separation, transition and incorporation. This phase of transition is what is understood as a liminality in the context of Victor Turner's what, my dear? Victor Turner's ritual symbolism. These words are mandatory in your answer. And as the phase of liminality is understood to be an candidate facing a crisis of statelessness, you see that that is what is understood as the stage of communitas. These three words will have to be there in your answer at any given day. And then talk about what is Turner actually speaking about, because you know that Turner talks about symbols, and to be very specific, he talks about what? Ritual symbolism. And when you look at ritual symbolism, what is the hook line that you write here? The line that you write here is what? Every ritual or every symbol is a unit of ritual, and it is a means of transformation. A symbol is a means of social transformation. And not only that, you also see that every symbol that is associated with the ritual, you see that it determines what is the meaning, and it also dictates what is the behavior of the individual. It also determines what is the meaning, and it dictates what is the behavior of the individual. Mandatory words to be present in your answer. That means, what are we talking? We are talking about liminality. We are talking about Turner. And then when I am clubbing both, when I am saying the Turner and liminality together, what do? You talk about the studies of Endembu society by Turner. He has spoken about what? Mukanda ceremony. He has spoken about what? The Madai tree. He has spoken about the comparison of Madai and Chicholi tree. And he speaks about two kinds. One is the dominant symbols. The other one is instrumental symbols or instrument symbols. And dominant symbols are those symbols which have independent value, whereas instrument symbols are those symbols which have derived value. The basic understanding. And conclude the answer. 10 marker. How will you conclude? Anything is fine at your convenience. But generally, what do I see at this particular point of time is it is mostly paragraph. But when I am writing characteristics of liminality, I will go point. When I am linking liminality and Turner, I will go for paragraph approach. That's easy, right? So that is the first question. Now we'll look at the second question. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, right? That's the second question, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Very simple again. Straightforward from the chapter of language. We'll look at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The intro should be what? You have to understand the introduction here is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis talks about the linguistic determinism, where you find that language is seen to be influencing culture. Now once you have understood that language influencing culture, where you see that linguistic determinism, Then you talk about the understanding of Sapir. Sapir, again one core line here. What is a core line? A language is a force which coerces the thought of an individual. Language is a force which coerces the thought of an individual. That means what is it becoming? It is becoming a force to determine the kind and the organization of the thought. It is becoming a force to determine the kind and the organization of a thought. So that is one thing that you will have to write. And what was Urf talking about? Urf was trying to understand the comparison between the Hopi society and the English society. When you look at the Hopi society, Hopi speaking language, what was happening? We see that for an abstract characteristic features, there was no number. But if they were having number, that meant that it is a physical system. And so automatically what happened? They never believed in a concept called as time. And that is why we see that Hopi society always lives in what? Present. They never lived in past, future, because they never had a reference of time. But whereas when you look at the American or when you look at the English society, what was happening? English society has a word called time, and automatically what happens? You see a difference. That means what? The language is coercing the culture, the language is coercing the thought. Are you understanding this dimension? And then slowly you can also talk about what? You can also include the William Ludd's understanding of double speak. What is this William Ludd's understanding of double speak? It is categorically saying you are representing the same thing with the different choice of words. A simple example of the usage of word captain for your Rapido drivers, or strategic restructuring of the companies for layoffs, or for delivery boys we're using what? Delivery executives. So that becomes the concept of double speak. Talk about all of this. You will have to talk about paragraph format only here. You can't have something which is precise. I am describing what is double speak. Right? It is not like GS double speak is meaning restructuring of the language or representing it in a different. That doesn't work out here. So that is another important dimension that you need to remember. How will you conclude? After you write this, 20% should be what? Criticism to Sapir Urf. What is a criticism? You see that culture also influences language. This is extreme form of linguistic determinism, but rather we also have cultural determinism which is seen to be existing. You can write one example. You can talk about Nancy Hickerson's case study. Nancy Hickerson case study that was discussed. What is that? That talks about culture influencing language. And finally conclude. What is the conclusion? Linguistic relativism. Language influences culture, culture influences language. Simple. Next. Well, look at third question. Third question is talking about case study and objectivity. See, I always keep telling my dear, whenever you are writing answer, in any 10 marker, if they say X and Y, what is the simple structure? Half page X, half page Y, the second page is X and Y. Simple. So what is this X here? X here I spoke about case study. What is case study? A detailed study, having or comprehensive study, talking about various dimensions. And what are the characteristic features of case study will have to be discussed. And give any of the example. Whatever people were doing, Margaret Mead had a case study. Ruth Benedict had a case study. The Society of Allure studied by Cora Du Bois was a case study. Discuss about this case study, sir. One case study. And then Y is talking about what? Y is talking about objectivity. Now there is a person by name A.W. Green talks about the characteristic features of objectivity. And when you look at this characteristic features of objectivity, what is objectivity for our understanding? Something which is based on what? Something which is based on data. Something which is valid. Something which is not completely based on assumptions. That is objectivity. And something which has greater utility is again objective. Are you understanding? And something which does not have ethnocentric understanding is objective. And then the third dimension should have been what? You see, you will definitely see issues of objectivity in case study. Talk about those. You will definitely see issues of objectivity in case study as a method. Why? Because any case study is what? What is the person's understanding who is conducting the case study? And depending upon that, you have the study, you have the observation. Do we have any objective methodology which is existing there? No. Right? And again, the comprehensive nature of the case study by itself will affect the objectivity that is existing. So discuss about that and then conclude. What should be the conclusion? What is a better way of promoting objectivity? Participant observation. And through participant observation, the cultural relativistic perspective. Along with the cultural relativistic perspective, the person needs to be scientific. Right? Then only we see that there is balance of the study and the objectivity. Simple. Again, instead of giving you field work, I gave you case study. Because case study is resultant of what? Field work. So you should not be boggled there. I studied only for objectivity of field work. I did not study about case study. Very similar understandings. Right? So that is with respect to third question. Now we'll look at this next question. Endangered languages and conservation. Now here, very simple. That means we are talking about 1D. Endangered languages and conservation. Now you would start off by talking about what is the definition of endangered language. Endangered language is that language which is having less than 10,000 members speaking. And then straight away talk about what are the reasons of endangering a particular language. Endangering a particular language, that could be because of indigenous factors and that could be exogenous factors. Reasons: indigenous, exogenous. Indigenous with respect to what medium? Indigenous, lack of preservation, lack of sensitization, majoritarian cultures, majoritarian impositions, or cultural appropriations. All of these are internal. Exogenous factors like what? Westernization, globalization, Anglicization. Because we see homogenization of language happening with what? English. So all this is what? Endangering. Right? Then immediately what you should do? You should talk about what? Some examples. What are some examples? Bo language is extinct. Dhimsa is also endangered and going extinct. Right? Over 216 languages are seen to be in the endangered category. Or you can simply say over 200 languages are considered to be endangered in India. Very simple. And an extreme form of endangered language is what is turning into extinction. Now here, then you'll have to talk about the conservation. You'll have to talk about conservation. Always remember, my dear, this is like general studies. But where is your anthropology coming? Anthropology will come when you're writing the reasons. Appropriation, transculturation, right? Cultural imposition. Are you understanding? Assimilation tendencies. All these are what? Some anthropological perspectives that I'm trying to influence. And once you ethnocide, right? That means what? Death of the culture. And language is part of culture. So discuss about that. And then in the conservation, what do you do? In the context of conservation, you can talk about what are the institutional mechanisms. What are the constitutional mechanisms? Yes, we have constitutional mechanisms for protection of languages, right? You see Article 29, right? Language, script, culture, talking about that. Then Article 350, 351, those aspects, fundamentally protecting languages. Then you have institutional mechanisms, like that there is a Central Institute for Language Protection in Mysuru. In Mysuru, we have an institution which is protecting, a central institution to protect these endangered languages. And then apart from that, you can also talk about certain administrative measures. For example, the classical language status. Right? Talking about the classical language status. Simple. 2 3 points. Two under institutional, 2 under conservation, 2 under constitutional, 2 under administrative. Don't you think here it is an imperative for us to specifically discuss about tribal language protection? Yes or no? Yes, tribal language protection. Where we are promoting the primary education in what? The tribal language. For example, you see the Odisha primer model. You see Madhya Pradesh. Now you see state of Andhra Pradesh. All these people are doing what, my dear? One side they are giving the tribal language, one side they are giving the English translation. That means one way it is what? Promoting education in the respective language. And you look at national education policy. National education policy is also talking about such kind of protection, giving importance to the mother tongue. And that is a fundamental aspect for you to conserve the language. Discuss about this and conclude. What will be the conclusion? You can simply say language is means of transmission of, or means of expression and emotion. Means of expression and emotion. And with the emerging exogenous factors, the indigenous methods of conservation needs to be promoted. The indigenous methods of conservation needs to be promoted. Right? Next. Opposition and mediation. How many of you were able to decipher that this was from thought? When you are writing, this is from thought. Right? Opposition and mediation, who has given this 1E? It is majorly given by Edmund Leach. And when you talk about this opposition and mediation, this is countering what? Levi-Strauss' understanding of theory of binary opposition. The simple understanding is, Levi-Strauss says there are two polar opposites which are discrete. Either it is good and bad, pure and pollution, dark or bright, colorful or colorless, dry or wet. Binary opposition, the thinking pattern, Gestalt's psychology has fundamentally some set of patterns, some set of ideology which is seen to be existing, and this set of patterns are seen to be existing in binary opposition. Yes or no, good or bad, should I join anthropology test series or not? You are all in double minds. So what does that mean? That simply means binary opposition. But what is Leach saying? Leach categorically says that there is nothing to be on binary opposition, or there is no discrete binary opposites, but rather it always exists in mediation. And he also believes that all of the thought process that is existing is continuous. All of the thought process that is seen to be existing is continuous. So that means when we say there is a continuous thought process that is existing, that means there is no discrete opposites which are existing, but rather it's a continuum. You see this seen in the context of tribe caste continuum. You see that it is seen in the context of folk urban continuum. You see that it is seen to be in the context of little tradition and great tradition. Yes, in all of this, what is happening? You have a continuum which is existing, which is a continuous system or a continuous process. And when you look at Edmund Leach is studying the Highland Burma society. The Highlanders of Burma. When he is studying the Highlanders of Burma, he is studying about the political structure of the Highlanders Burma. And when you look at the political structure of the Highlanders Burma, he talks about what? He talks about Gumlao. He talks about Shan, and the mediation is Gumsa. This is more egalitarian, Gumlao. This is more authoritarian, and Gumsa is combination of egalitarian and authoritarian. It is situational. Are you understanding this? So you explain about what is opposition and mediation. And the premise is what? It is an extension of theory of binary opposition, where there is nothing to be in a discrete opposition, but rather it is a continuous system of thought process which is existing. And what is the belief with respect to Leach? When he is studying the Burma society, he says that no society is in equilibrium, but rather the society is always seen to be in oscillating equilibrium. Rather, the society is seen to be in oscillating equilibrium. That means it keeps changing. Right? So, that is one dimension that you need to understand about this opposition and mediation. No, nothing. It's a word, keyword which is picked up from Edmund Leach. That's it. Nobody will tell you opposition and mediation are given by Edmund Leach. No, that doesn't happen. It's very rare case where they talk about William Ogburn and cultural lack, some question like that. Now, for suppose if they ask you social drama, what will you do? You will have to write about Turner and social drama. If they are asking about social fact, if they are asking about culture shock. So these are some of the key concepts which are always to be remembered. Just like you remember theory of binary opposition by Strauss, you should also remember opposition and mediation by Leach. Sixth question with respect to that is totemism and exogamy. Straight away, who gave this? Totemism and exogamy by Fraser. Right? So what are you supposed to understand? You talk about what is totemism. You know totemism is what? There is a sacred symbol, there is a sacred entity which is called as totem. That could be plant, that could be animal, that could be any entity, animate, inanimate, anything. That is considered as totem. And what is seen to be happening in the context of James Fraser's understanding? James Fraser's understanding where there is totem, and around this totem there is a taboo which is created. Right? There is a taboo which is created around this totem. And because of this taboo which is created around this totem, what happens? The totem is considered sacred. And as the totem is considered sacred, the totem is conserved, preserved, and the totem is promoted. And as an extension to this, it is seen that the totem happens to be the reason for a pregnancy. Totem happens to be the reason for pregnancy. And when you see that totem is the reason for pregnancy, what happens when you look at a particular group? This social group is having one totem. This social group is having another totem. And what are they saying? The totem is reason for the pregnancy. That means all the women and the men in the social group are considered to be siblings. Can they engage in sexual intercourse? No. Such a feeling has resulted in something called as incest taboo. Such a feeling has resulted in something called as incest taboo, where because totem was considered to be the reason for the pregnancy, they were not allowed to engage in sexual intercourse. If they had engaged, that would be considered as incest. So there was a taboo which was centered around this incest. And this incest taboo has resulted in what? Has resulted in exogamy. That means people or women from here could move to this, and women from here could move to this. Exogamy is what? Marrying outside your own group. Explain all of this. Simple. Right? But just simple understanding with respect to this. A number of people have built upon this particular totemism and exogamy. Now when you look at, for suppose say, the concept of ancestor worship. There is a concept of ancestor worship, and the reason why we have ancestor worship is the theory of dependency. When you look at this theory of dependency, when society is dependent on the ancestors for pregnancy, they worship ancestors. Which is very similar again. That is different, but Levi-Strauss there has never brought in the concept of taboo. Levi-Strauss there has talked about what? Exogamy based on what? Exchange of women. Incest taboo. But does he talk about totemism? No. He doesn't talk about totemism there. I am saying totemism is that religious phenomena which is seen to be existing, that sacred phenomena which is existing. I can draw this, the totem could be because maybe some of my ancestors are also residing in that. You see, what is the James Fraser's understanding? Bush soul theory of totemism. In Bush soul theory of totemism, what is happening? The ancestor or the soul is seen to be going and resting in the bush. That is why we are considering that as sacred. So that could be discussed. Simple description here with respect to totemism and exogamy of Fraser. Right? Next. You can write those. Not an issue. Next. Culture influences personality and personality influences culture. Critically analyze. It is just asking you culture, personality, school. What is your culture, personality, school? Again, the introduction statement should be what? For whatever thought you are writing, what should be your structure, my dear? What is the premise? What are the thinkers? What is the field work? What are the observations? And what is the significance? What is the anthropological applications? And what is the criticism? No second thought. And extend this to understanding of Indian anthropology. Towards the last part of your answer. Now in culture personality school, we see three perspectives. Culture influencing personality, personality influencing culture, and culture influencing personality in reciprocal manner. This is given by Margaret Mead. This is given by Ruth Benedict. And this is spoken by whom? Ralph Linton, Abraham Gardiner, and Cora Du Bois. Margaret Mead has done various studies. Margaret Mead has talked about the Samoan society versus American society. She has done some studies on Papua New Guinea. She has done some studies with respect to Arapesh, Mondungbor, and Shamboli. Right? That is one basic understanding. And who has criticized? Derek Freeman has criticized Margaret Mead. When you look at Ruth Benedict talks about what? Personality influencing culture. She talks about a guardian spirit is responsible for this, which is resulting in culture. And the guardian spirit could be two types, Apollonian and Dionysian. And when you look at this, Apollonian means the positive characteristics and Dionysian means the negative characteristics. And where she has done studies with respect to the Zuni society, Dobu society, and Kwakatl society. Zuni society was known to be having Apollonian. Dobu society was known to be having Dionysian, and Kwakatl society was known to be having Dionysian, and this is also an example of potlatch system. And both of them has done an extended study on nation character studies. And when you look at Ralph Linton, Abraham Gardiner, they fundamentally spoke about the basic personality. They spoke about basic personality. And when you look at Ralph Linton says what? The basic culture is responsible for similarities in socialization. Because of these similarities in socialization, what is seen to be happening? They have a common belief system. Because of this common belief system, what is understood? They have common personality, and this common personality is slowly translating into what? Basic personality. But whereas when you look at Abraham Gardiner, What is observed in the context of Abraham Gardiner? Abraham Gardiner talks about what? That this basic personality is resultant because of two kinds of institutions. One is the primary, the other one is secondary institutions. Basic understanding. And when you look at Abraham Gardiner, the Cora Dubois talks about model personality. And what is Cora Dubois talking about? Cora Dubois saying it is model personality. That means the most occurring characteristic feature is what is understood as the model personality. He classifies. But the effect of primary and secondary is spoken by Abraham Gardiner. Right? And then talk about how are you using this in Indian anthropology. You use this in Indian anthropology while understanding tribal cultures. You use this in Indian anthropology when you're trying to understand the process of enculturation. Because what was studied in Alluri society? Alluri society, Cora Dubois studies that the people there are shallow, apathetic. The reason was there was negligence by the parents during their upbringing process. Why parents were negligent? Because the male was responsible for the meat and female was responsible for food grains. And both of them were having their own division of labor. They were engaging in certain activities and they neglected the enculturation process. So that was seen to be happening, and automatically what happens? How are you using it in enculturation, or how are you using it in socialization process? And don't you think culture personality school majorly spoke about what, my dear? Understanding of nature, man, spirit complex. Because the kind of guardian spirit that was existing, which was responsible for the kind of the personality which was responsible for further culture, is nothing but this. Because nature related to man, man related to spirit, nature related to spirit. Understandings of LP Vidyarthi in Malayer tribe. Easy? Yes, that's how you derive your answer, my dear. Now I can beautifully write a 20 marker. Effortless if you structure it, but otherwise it's a problem if you don't structure it. Okay. Language is medium of exchange of words, thoughts and culture in the society. Comment. What are they asking you? What are they asking you in this question? Language is a medium of exchange of words, thoughts and culture in the society. Comment. The question is categorically talking about the perspectives of language. It is talking about culture influencing language, language influencing culture. It is talking about social context of language. Whole 7th chapter I have given you in one question. When you see perspectives of language, you see 3 perspectives. One is the structural perspective. The other one is the functional perspective. The other one is the interactional perspective. Structural perspective is you're just looking at the structure of the language. Functional perspective is language is a means of what, my dear? Language is means of communication. And you can also say in the structural perspective, the Levi-Strauss understanding of exchange of 3 things. Exchange of words, exchange of goods and services and exchange of women, which is maintaining the societal structure. And the third interactional perspective is the structural functionalist perspective, where language maintains the social relations. The second aspect that you will have to talk about is how language is influencing culture, that is Sapir-Whorf. And how culture is influencing language. Or instead of, if I want to reframe this particular aspect of culture influencing language, I can say language reflects culture. And how is language reflecting culture? Language is reflecting culture in the form of the justice system. Language is reflecting culture in the form of perceptions. Language is reflecting culture in the form of the value base. Language is reflecting culture in the context of what kind of social divisions are happening in the society. And language is also reflecting culture when it comes to the technological upgradation and when it is coming to the professional speciality. We say smart generation, no? Smart kids. Previously we used to say intelligent kids. Now we are saying smart kids. Why? The technological upgradation in the society is more today. We are discussing about smart systems. So we compare smart systems and smart kids. Are you understanding? So language reflects culture. Language reflects technological upgradation. Language reflects professional speciality. All of this is happening with respect to this. And then you talk about the social context, where you talk about age-based, where you talk about gender-based, where you talk about idiolect, where you talk about dialect, where you talk about the Pidgin, where you talk about Creole. That is this particular question. Easy, right? It's only that you were supposed to decipher this question. Language is medium of exchange of words, thought and culture in the society. All the aspects we have discussed. Okay. Next. Data collection is means of research and fieldwork in anthropology. Give an account of various data collection methods. Now when we are looking at this, it is talking about what? How is it a means of research and fieldwork? This is, I would say, 20%. 80% should be on data collection methods. What should have been the structure there? How data collection is means of research. How data collection is means of research, right? And not only that, how is it means of field work? How is it the means of field work? It's enabling you to have data. What would you do? You would analyze. What would you do? You would conclude. You would conclude, and on the conclusion, what do? You build theory. Right? And data would also give you what? Data would also give you some comparative analysis. Data would also give you what? Data would also give you some holistic perspective. Data would also give you what? Some scientific understanding. That is why we need data. Data is means. And automatically what happens? Data would also make the fieldwork more effective for the reason it makes it an emic understanding. It makes it an emic understanding. Easy. And then you talk about data collection methods. When you look at data collection methods, what is happening in data collection methods? There are two methods. One is intensive methods. The other one is survey methods. The other one is primary methods, secondary methods. We can discuss that also. Quantitative, qualitative can also be discussed, but rather I would say primary, secondary. And the other one is intensive survey. In intensive, what all do we have? We have something like interview, participant observation, genealogy, case study. All these are intensive methods. And what are survey methods? Survey methods, questionnaire, schedule, life history, oral history, and secondary sources are also part of this. And what are you supposed to write here? You are supposed to write what is it. You are supposed to write types of it. You are supposed to write the merit and demerit. These are the questions which will allow you to score more. Types of interview, types of observation, just flow chart. Yes. You don't describe. Easy? Yes. Next. Definitely mention whom. What you are supposed to do there. When you are writing each of this method, you will have to give anthropological examples. Don't forget. When you are writing genealogy, you are supposed to mention W.H.R. Rivers. Right? When you are mentioning questionnaire, you are supposed to mention L.H. Morgan. Participant observation, Malinowski. So definitely use them. Right? Next. Symbols are vehicles of culture and means of social transformation. Compare and contrast the symbolic and interpretative approach to culture. Very simple.
Symbols as means of culture అని మీరు లాక్స్ లో ఒకటి చెప్పారు, రివిజన్ ఒకటి చెప్పారు. Symbols are means of culture and మీరు టర్నర్ చెప్పారు, Keats.
Vehicles of culture is by Keats. Transformation by Turner. Right? So you see, when you talk about symbols, symbols are means of social transformation, that is by Victor Turner. Transformation Turner. And when you look at vehicles of culture, that is said by Keats. Give this basic introduction. Why? Because they are trying to understand symbols. And according to them, what is culture? Culture is a set of symbols which are meaningfully arranged. Which are meaningfully arranged. That is basic understanding of culture. Then straight away get into symbolic versus interpretative. Symbolic versus interpretative. Who has given this? Turner. Who has given this? Keats. What was his core funda? Ritual symbolism. His core funda was what? Ritual symbolism. In ritual symbolism, what did he say? Symbols are the units of rituals. And every symbol directs and dictates. Every symbol directs and dictates. And symbols are the means of social transformation. But whereas when you look at interpretative aspect, he was talking about the meanings of the symbols. And what was the nature here? All of that was completely contextual in nature. Completely contextual in nature. And you are supposed to talk about what? Symbols are vehicles of culture. Symbols are vehicles of culture which have their own set of meanings according to the context of their study. According to their context, there is different meanings, there is change which is happening. And then slowly talk about what is their field work. What is the field work here? Field work there is what? Ndembu society. Here it is Balinese cockfight. Javanese face mask, if you want to talk about. And then talk about what are the observations made in the field work. Observations. Then anthropological applications here what? Anthropological applications like social drama. Anthropological applications like the concepts of communitas. Like the aspects of liminality. Now here anthropological applications like what? Like the aspects of thick description. That layer by layer approach. Like the aspects of hermeneutics. That means again detailed study. That is done by whom? Keats. Primordial approach you can say. Primordial approach of ethnicity by Keats. That could also be spoken. Religion is nothing but set of symbols. Again Keats' understanding of symbolic understanding of religion. Right? And then talk about criticism. We have a common criticism. What is that? Common criticism is oversimplification. That means they are saying that culture is nothing but set of symbols. Not only oversimplification, but you also see it is abstract. And not only that, you also see that this is a subjective understanding of culture. And if you want to make a reference to taxonomical approach of D.M. Snyder for understanding symbols. Because what is the line of symbol that is spoken by D.M. Snyder? D.M. Snyder says, symbol is something which is meant for something else. D.M. Snyder in the taxonomical approach says that symbol is something meant for something else. That means the form is different, representation is different, meaning is different, understanding is different. That is spoken by D.M. Snyder, and every cultural institution has a different symbol. Right? So you can conclude upon that. Okay. Extension of classical evolutionism is neo evolutionism. Now most of the people tried writing neo evolutionism and classical evolutionism. The question is, what extension of classical evolutionism is? Neo evolutionism. But I would say, what is that? When you see classical evolutionism is more of 19th century evolutionism. And when you look at classical evolutionism, it is more of talking about the similarity of the innovation capacity. And when you talk about classical evolutionism, it is talking about the psychic unity of mankind. It is talking about majorly the concepts of social Darwinism. It is talking about the aspects of culture parallels and cultural similarities. And the aspect is unilinear evolution. That is classical evolutionism. How neo-evolutionism is extension of this? Because in neo-evolutionism, this is largely 20th century. And this is majorly dealing with what? There are different forces of evolution. Somebody says technology is a force. Somebody says energy is a force. Somebody says environment is a force of evolution of culture. But they believed only in similar capacities of innovation. And they never believed in unilinear, but rather Julian H. Stewart says there are three forms. One is the universal form. The other one is multilineal form. The other one is general and specific evolution by Shawlins and Service. And setting this context, from there you take off explaining on neo-evolutionism. Because the question is very clear, how it is an extension. You have set the context and then explain about each of this. Universal Evolution by G.V. Child talks about what is the primacy. Technology is the primacy. Superiority of technology. And he compares what? He compares the Paleolithic and Mesolithic with the savagery. He compares the Neolithic with the lower barbarism. And Chalcolithic with the upper barbarism. And he compares the Bronze Age with the civilized stage. And he calls Neolithic as what? Revolution in the book What Happened in History. And he also writes a book called as Social Evolution. That is what is G.V. Child. And what is multilineal evolution spoken by Julian H. Stewart. Julian H. Stewart talks about what? Culture ecology approach. A change in ecology, change in environment results in change in culture. Why? For every environment there is a corresponding technology, and for every technology there is corresponding culture. That is Julian H. Stewart. What is Leslie Alvin White saying? Leslie Alvin White talks about culture energy approach, where C is equals to E into T. Every progress in the culture is dependent upon what is the energy that is harnessed. More energy captured, more cultural developments. Energy is the primacy, technology is the primacy, environment is the primacy. And finally, who came here? Shawlins and Service. Shawlins and Service spoke about the political and the economic aspects. Shawlins studies about what? Shawlins studies about the Melanesian and the Polynesian societies. Right? And he also says what? The economics is integrated in the social life of a man. That is what is Shawlins saying. And when you look at Service, Service categorically talks about what? Evolution, band, tribe, chiefdom, state. And he talks about what? He brings in a comparison with cultural evolution and biological evolution. And when you look at this cultural evolution and biological evolution, for biological evolution, you have the nature of diversity and you also have nature of progress which is existing. Diversity is specific evolution and progress is general evolution. Just like biological evolution, we have cultural evolution happening. Cultural evolution also has diversity and progress, and diversity is specific, progress is general. Easy, simple diagrammatic representation if you want to remember. It is what? Leslie Alvin White was telling this: technology, energy, progress of culture. But there are some elements which are diverse. This is specific evolution, this is general evolution. The central core part, the progress. All this is the understanding of Scholens and Service, and this is neo-evolutionism. And where are we applying neo-evolutionism? Very simple. In understanding archaeological aspects, in understanding tool technology, again in understanding NMS, because NMS is all about what? Culture ecology. NMS is culture ecology, nature, man, spirit, complex. Then you could also talk about the ecological adaptations. Again, there you have the neo-evolutionist school, especially adaptations to high altitude, adaptations to hot, cold temperatures. All this is what? Culture is changing according to the environment. The cultural type will change, cultural climax will change, cultural trait will change, cultural pattern will change, because environment is changing. So this is, and the last question is what? Fieldwork has been evolving due to interplay of various factors. In the light of the statement, provide the history of evolution and issues with fieldwork. So it is talking about what? History, and it is talking about issues. Very simple. Simply define what is fieldwork. You have powder maker's definition of fieldwork, right? And talk about anthropological perspectives of fieldwork. And then talk about evolution of fieldwork. And the evolution of fieldwork is very simple. The Malinowskian phase is the reference. Pre-Malinowskian, post-Malinowskian, and we are in the contemporary phase of evolution. What has happened here? It is armchair anthropologist. Here it is all dependent upon secondary sources. When you look at Malinowskian phase, it spoke about participant observation. It spoke about rapport building, it spoke about language learning. And then apart from that, you also see that in Malinowskian, the field work started becoming more emic in nature. The field work started becoming more emic in nature. That means insider's perspective were developed. And slowly in the post-Malinowskian phase, what do you observe? In the post-Malinowskian phase, you categorically see that technology came into the existence. And women anthropologists started coming into the picture. For example, you see Margaret Mead, right? Ruth Benedict, Cora Dubois, all these are post-Malinowskian phase. And slowly in the contemporary phase, you see that there is a phase of autoethnography. You see the aspects of media anthropology. That means where you see the social media become the field of study. Talk about the issues. Issues of objectivity, reliability, utility, privacy, Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect is all about what? The behavior changes as the person is seen to be under observation. And you conclude, fieldwork is the heart and soul for the expansion of anthropology as a branch of study. Right? Fieldwork stands as a testimonial for enabling anthropology to be holistic in nature. Anything. Right? Link fieldwork, anthropology and holism. Is this clear? Right? So this is all about test 1. Ensure that you are writing it on time. Right? We are doing this for accountability and timely revisions. You have completed 50%, 40%, 60%, doesn't matter. Come and sit and write, test and get it evaluated. I am setting the question paper. I am giving you the explanation. I will only evaluate. No third person. I don't believe in third person with respect to anthropology at least. It's completely me ethnocentric perspective. Right? Is this clear? So that is it from my side for the explanation. Okay. Thank you. We'll meet for the next test. Ensure that you're writing. The next test is on 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5. Thank you.